Good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, December 7th, 2015, and this is a Moscow City Regular Council meeting. Jim?
Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jim. We have an amendment to the agenda tonight. Gary, would you please explain?
Thank you, Your Honor. We wish to amend the agenda to include the proclamation in remembrance of Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th. Staff oversight just kept it out, so we're asking permission to amend the agenda so we don't lose the opportunity to honor the veterans.
And it is my pleasure to read the Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. Whereas,
excuse me, Your Honor.
Do I need to approve it?
You got to take a vote of the council.
Okay.
I move to approve the agenda change.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? I will continue on then. Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. Thank you all. Whereas Congress has designated December 7th as National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, and whereas the date is set aside each year in solemn recognition of the events of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, 1941, when America was attacked by military forces of Imperial Japan. And whereas this marks the 74th anniversary of that event that led to America's involvement in World War II. And whereas more than 2,400 people perished and more than 1,100 were wounded in that attack. And whereas of approximately 1.2 million U.S. veterans from World War II who are still alive and about 6,600 live in Idaho. And whereas we wish to honor the brave men and women who served in that war and to reflect the sacrifices of so many others who have shared their devotion to duty and freedom. And whereas the city of Moscow will recognize the occasion by flying the flag of the United States at half-staff until sunset today in reverence for those who died protecting the freedoms that we enjoy today. Now, therefore, I, Bill Lambert, the mayor of the city of Moscow, call upon the residents of the community to join us in a moment of silence to honor those who died at Pearl Harbor in service to our country. Thank you all. Now I will move on to the consent agenda.
Your Honor, I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Dan and a second by Art to approve the consent agenda. I'll start the roll with John.
Aye.
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 Aye. And aye.
Okay, we'll move on. It's kind of an echo in here, isn't there?
A little hot mic'd.
We'll move on to item number 2, is staff recognition report. Gary, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce Police Chief David Duke, who has Officer Jason House here, who received recognition from the department this last weekend. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for this opportunity. Each year, the police department selects an officer based on mostly a peer review and a peer recommendation. So this doesn't come from the command staff, but mostly from those that work with them. And it's my honor and privilege to recognize Officer House tonight before you. Officer House was selected as the 2015 Officer of the Year because of his excellent work performance and distinctive positive attitude, especially his can-do approach to all aspects of police work. Officer House reflects the department's core values of pride, service, integrity, commitment, and excellence every day he comes to work. While attending the Post Academy in the fall of 2013, he was awarded special recognition in the firearm sharpshooter category. Officer House also served as the class vice president and commencement speaker for that graduation ceremony. In the fall of 2014, Officer House was recognized by the University of Idaho for his excellence in their Operation Education Scholarship Program. In a newsletter article recognizing his life struggles and accomplishments, the writer commented, quote, "His new job as a patrol officer is every bit as satisfying as his days in the Army. He still gets in, shines in stressful situations, comes to the aid of local citizens, and puts on an awesome uniform every day," end of quote. Even though Officer House stands at 6'7", his real stature is measured from his dedication to community policing, facing the challenges encountered with a spirit of confident assurance, promoting self-sacrificing teamwork, and possessing a professional will to succeed that is embraced in humility. Officer House has proven one can excel when one has the veracity to succeed with the proper support and right attitude. He is enthusiastic, intelligent, and dedicated to his chosen career as a law enforcement officer. Overall, he's an exceptional asset not only to the Moscow Police Department, but to the community as well. I'd like to introduce Officer House at this time, if he'd come forward. We have an award here. We'd like to present him. If, Mayor, you'd like to come down.
It was a very good uniform.
We put a plaque together for every officer that's been honored since 2000, and we also put his mug on the top, so it's an opportunity to recognize him.
Are we in a good spot, Gary?
That'll work. Smile.
Can you smile under a thread light? Smile.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to say a few words?
Congratulations, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
It's up to you if you'd like to speak.
Yeah. You know, Moscow's been a great community. I grew up right out in Deary, so this is a place I call home. I was pretty glad to have the opportunity to return home to attend the University of Idaho, and I couldn't be more happy serving the community that I love to be a part of. So thank you so much. It's a great honor.
And is your wife there?
Oh, yeah, she's right back there.
Introduce her.
Stand up, please.
That's my beautiful wife, Bree.
What was your wife's name?
Bree.
Bree. Okay, Bree. Welcome. Thank you very much, and good job, Jason.
Thank you.
Officer House, you bet.
Just gotta say,
Dan wants to take it back.
you know, it's nice to have Jason out there, because when I get on the fire EMS scenes, it's nice to have someone out there I can see eye to eye with. But
I think it's somebody you can look up to.
I'm still not sure how he folds himself into those Tauruses. There you go.
Okay, and with that, we'll move on to mayor's appointments, and the first is confirmation of appointment. Lori Hopkins. Gary, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Your Honor. It's my pleasure to present Lori Hopkins, who's been the executive assistant in the administration office for the past 12 years. She was selected, interviewed by a group of peers to succeed and forward her name to Mayor Lambert for appointment as city clerk. She will take the place of Stephanie Claus, who's been clerk for over 12 years. And she will be, in my tenure with the city, she will be the 5th city clerk I've had the pleasure of serving with. She's got a big load to carry, and I'm sure she's up for the task. So I'd present her name to you as your appointment for confirmation by the city council tonight.
Okay, Dan?
Your Honor, I would move we approve the confirmation of Lori Hopkins as city clerk.
I'll second that.
Okay, I got a motion by Dan and a second by Wayne to approve the confirmation of appointment Lori M. Hopkins as Moscow City Clerk. I'll start the roll with Walter.
Absolutely aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Emphatically, yes.
Okay, well, you know, I asked Lori today if she'd like to speak. And she doesn't, of course, because she's so modest about things, but I've known this lady for many, many years, and I look forward to working with her, and as does this crew of counselors and fellow counselors down the road. So she's terrific. We are going to miss Stephanie as well, because she was terrific as well. So both of these ladies are excellent, and I hold high esteem for both of them. But anyway, congratulations, Lori. You're going to do good.
Your Honor, if I could administer the oath of office, please.
Okay.
Okay, if you turn around and face the council. Thank you. And raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear or affirm.
Swear.
Okay, you need to repeat after me.
I do solemnly swear
That I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Idaho,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Idaho,
and that I will faithfully discharge all the duties of city clerk
and that I will
faithfully discharge
all the duties of the city clerk
of Moscow, Idaho, according to the best of my ability.
of Moscow, Idaho, to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Okay.
Key word there, Lori, was faithfully.
Okay, very nice. And we'll move on. I have a whole slew of reappointments that I'd like to present to the council. And I'll start with the list, and I'll start with Jerry Long, Board of Adjustment, which his term will expire 12/31 of 2020. Jim Realistic, Fair and Affordable Housing, expires 12/31 of 2018. Jill Maxwell, Fair and Affordable Housing Commission, expiration 12/31 of 2018. Stetson Holman, Fair and Affordable Housing Commission, expires 12/31/2016, and that is a college seat. Gina Teruscio, Farmers Market Commission, expires 12/31 of 2018, and that's a Chamber of Commerce position. Aaron Carroll, Farmers Market Commission, that expires 12/31/2018, and that's member at large. Jack Porter, Historic Preservation Commission, expires 12/31/2018. Emily Aizawa, Human Rights Commission, expires 12/31/2016. That is a college seat. Rula Award Rafferty, Human Rights Commission, expires 12/31/2018. Aaron Agidius, Human Rights Commission, expires 12/31/2018. Diane Walker, Moscow Arts Commission, expires 12/31/2019. Elizabeth Graff, Moscow Arts Commission, expires 12/31/2019. Karen Clifford, Moscow's Pathway Commission, expires 12/31/2018. Damon Burton, Parks and Rec Commission, expires 12/31/2018. Ted Kishaw, Parks and Rec Commission, expires 12/31/2018. Jacqueline Wallace, Parks and Recreation Commission, expires 12/31/2018. Rob Parrish, Planning and Zoning Commission, expires 12/31/2020. Keegan Caldwell, Sustainable Environment Commission, expires 12/31/2018. Victoria Seaver, Sustainable Environment Commission, expires 12/31/2018. Don Meyer, Transportation Commission, expires 12/31/2020. Joel Hamilton, Transportation Commission, expires 12/31/2020. Patrick Fickety, Tree Commission, expires 12/31/2018. Amanda Argana, Tree Commission, expires 12/31/2018. There's a total of 23 of these appointees. Dan?
Your Honor, I would move we approve the slate of 23 reappointments.
I would second that.
Okay, I got a motion by Art and a second by Dan to confirm and approve. Yeah, a motion by Dan and a second by Art to confirm all 23 of these commission appointments. I'll start the roll with John.
Aye.
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 Okay, and we move on. I know there's a number of those folks out in the audience. Would you please stand? I know there's a bunch. I know I see Gina, Aaron, Victoria. Yay. Thank you so very much. If you wanted to speak or say a few words, I'd be more than happy to let you come up to the podium. Not that you have to, but we certainly appreciate all the work and the efforts that our citizens on our commissions do. It's a time commitment, and there's a lot of work involved, and we certainly appreciate that. As mayor, I really look forward to that. Okay. I'll move on to the next thing, which is public comment period, the mayor's response. I always hold this for 15 minutes. If there's anybody out there who would like to come forward and speak to us, they're welcome to do it. State your name and address. Limit your remarks to 3 minutes. And as long as there's nothing in front of planning and zoning or in front of our agenda tonight or the Board of Adjustments, you're free to speak. Seeing none come forward, I'll go ahead and move on to the next thing, which is a Citizens Commission report, Moscow Arts Commission, Kathleen Burns and Robin Holmgren. Kathleen?
Thank you. So our chair, Robin Olgram, is going to speak to the slideshow. So
How do you advance it?
yeah, like this.
Down here?
Yep.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilman, for letting us give you our annual update on the Moscow Arts Commission. As you can see, we have the largest commission, city commission in the city of Moscow. This can present some challenges, especially at a busy time of year, getting a quorum. But we have lots of projects, so we have lots of people to implement them. I would like to especially thank our city liaison, our council liaison, Dan Karskalen, who's been with us for the last couple of years. And those of you who missed 30-30-30 on Friday night, he rings a mighty fine cowbell. And Kathleen Burns and DJ Scalorn, who are our Arts Commission staff. So we have divided the work into several committees. The only one missing here is the Mayor's Arts Award. I think DJ left it off of the PowerPoint because that only happens every other year. The next Mayor's Arts Awards will be in 2016. The Art Walk has become a signature event for the City of Moscow and the Arts Commission. This year, 72 businesses hosted artists, and more than 120 artists participated. And you can see there's quite a list of entities that help with the planning and the implementation of Art Walk, which is every June, third week of June. One of the committees does community outreach, and one of their signature events has become First Thursday. This is a collaboration with Buy Local, the Pritchard Art Gallery, Moscow Chamber, and some downtown businesses. It is really a grassroots initiative. It happens without a lot of oversight and administration, and so every First Thursday there is art downtown, and I think it adds a lot of value to the community. They do poetry on the buses, which during the month of June we have, before Art Walk, we partner artists with visual artists with poets, and it's a lovely way to get the written word moving through town. One of the initiatives that the Community Outreach Committee spearheaded this year was the inauguration of the City of Moscow's first Poet Laureate. Tiffany Midge is serving a 3-year term. We are the second community in the state of Idaho to have a Poet Laureate, behind Boise. And it seems very appropriate for us to have a Poet Laureate, given the talent coming out of our community and our university. And it was very strategic to have the poetry and a Poet Laureate. It was a missing medium on the Arts Commission, and we're pretty proud that we now have the literary arts represented on the commission. I mentioned broadsides on the buses. If you've not met Tiffany, she has launched a project, The Poet is In, and she will be at One World Cafe every Saturday through the month of December. You can take your words of poetry to her, or go and talk about poetry with her. So the Public Art Committee is one of our biggest committees. It requires the most oversight. We take very seriously that we are a 1% for arts community. And this year we embarked on completing the Public Art Plan, which was adopted in 2015. This was a major work. Bill Belknap and his team really helped us pull it together. We couldn't have done it without him. WSU Landscape Architect students also helped us. So now we are looking forward to implementing the Public Art Plan. Among the projects that we do are small projects, and this year we accomplished the tree grates at MZ and a couple of vinyl wrap boxes. The library box we're particularly proud of. And there's another one out at Sweet Avenue. The Transit Center Sculpture Garden, we are in the 4th year of the Sculpture Garden there, and this is a partnership with the university's sculpture studio. The cool thing about the Transit Center is it was this university city private public partnership. We think the sculpture garden really adds value to the transit center. Art is exposed to people who maybe normally wouldn't see it. It gives emerging artists the chance to do public art and learn the process. And it highlights the importance of integrating the place, the plantings, the surrounding area with art. We change the sculptures out in time for Art Walk every year. In the last couple of years, several pieces have sold. I believe most of them to Pullman, correct? Which is awesome. Third Street Gallery has a steady schedule of exhibits. The Grand Gallery event was on Friday. 30 artists creating 30 works in 30 days that sell for $30. There were 900 pieces of art in the gallery on Friday night, and it's quite something to witness if you haven't been here before. We have a reception, no host bar, but some lovely food out and a jazz combo playing, and I understand that a third of the works were sold, and it was another successful 30-30-30. Entertainment in the Art is a great partnership with the library mostly, but again, we have companies and other entities that partner with us. It's great family entertainment in the summer in East City Park, our signature park. There are performances and the band plays. So this is the time of year that we start thinking about what's going to happen next year, and we have a nice list of activities we're looking at. We're still sort of in the brainstorming mode. The finalizing of this plan, this scope of work, will take place in the early part of next year under new leadership. I'm stepping down from the Arts Commission and as chair, so someone else can take care of this. And I have no doubt that they will implement some very fun things. I want to thank you again for letting us come, for your support. I ended up in this part of the world in the late 70s by chance, but I stayed by design. And a lot of that was because of the culture of arts in this community. It was a great place to raise children because it was important to me that they led artful lives. And in my work in economic development, I'm always taking my art hat out and putting it on, and it's getting easier to do without being ridiculed, I must say. And it's happening not just in our community, but it's happening in the national landscape as well. In 2013, there was finally a federal effort to measure the value of arts and culture in our gross domestic product. And just this week, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Elementary and Secondary Education Act that explicitly allows for funding to be used in arts in our schools, including integrating the arts into the STEM program. So perhaps, as it is my hope, the A will come into STEM and we will have STEAM. STEAM will be the new normal. It's been a privilege to serve, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Robin, for that nice presentation. I got to share with you the 30-30-30 sale that went on Friday. Of course, I was in Boise for AIC, but I did buy a piece. So I've got a piece of art that I like because I looked. I did I left Thursday mornings. Well, I did a little pre-check on Wednesday afternoon, so I got a chance to look at something. So I was able to solve. That's very, very nice. I look forward to enjoying that. Dan, you're the art liaison. Have you got a few comments you'd like?
I did. And it's one that I really enjoy going to. There's a lot of fun discussion at the meetings, and I hope that the rest of the council will let me be liaison again this next year. And it's just, as Robin says, we just, you see this economic ripple effect. It's obvious when you look at the art walk and see, how many folks end up downtown and all the businesses that do benefit from that, from just folks going around and checking out the art that we have displayed. So, and also with you want to talk about something to witness, and that's the first 5 minutes of the 30-30-30 sale. I ring the bell and then try to get out of the way. Nobody wanted to hear about Amway, so.
Thank you very much. Other comments for Robin or Kathleen?
Well, I'd just like
Art?
to thank Robin for being the chair for these years and accomplishing so much, and your efforts are much appreciated, and we thank you and all the other volunteers for what you do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay, we will move on to our next item, number 6, proposed changes to Title 5, Chapter 3, Ty Thompson. We're going to talk about FOG, which is a fat, oil, and grease, for those that do not know the true term of what the word FOG is, and Tyler Palmer is here as well. So I don't know, Tyler, if you want to start it off and turn it over
That's the plan. There's been a lot of applause so far tonight, Mayor and Council, and we don't expect to be the exception. We've got an exciting program here.
We're going to talk about fat, and so
we're going to talk about sewer, and that's everybody's favorite. So that's what we're here for. Yeah, that's right. Ty has put a lot of work into putting this program together, and we believe it's a program that will really benefit the city of Moscow. I'm just going to give a brief introduction of what it is, and then I'll let Ty take it over from there. FOG, we've been through a few council workshops and committee on this. Fats, oils, and greases is what it refers to. Those things that we all generate as we're cooking and putting things down the drain. And it really can be problematic for our sewer system. Since we went to the Public Works Finance Committee last week, we had a relatively serious sewer backup that was almost entirely attributable to FOG. It coming out of a food service establishment. Luckily, the establishment itself that was likely the source of a lot of the FOG found it once they saw that they had a basement that wasn't supposed to be a wading pool, and we were able to get it unplugged. But you know, it's one of those things where it can have such a large impact, not only on the producer, but anybody upstream. You know, luckily we caught this when we did, but you know, if it goes for longer, it can go upstream and affect a lot of businesses and residences that didn't necessarily contribute as much. And so that's really the goal of our FOG program, is that, you know, the fats, oils, and greases, they are a cost to the city. They can damage city infrastructure, and they can be something that requires us to go out and put in a lot of work and damage the city infrastructure, but also private infrastructure. And so it's something we want to deal with, and we think we've got a good program to do that. The program that we're going to propose today is applicable citywide. It applies to everybody within the city of Moscow. We have different strategies for trying to reach out to different levels of compliance, depending on the potential impact that somebody might have on the system. Much in the same way that the police department will enforce speeding more robustly in a school zone than they will in a cul-de-sac. That doesn't mean to say that if they get a call that says someone's going 100 miles in a cul-de-sac that they're not going to respond. This will be implemented much the same way. We look at the impact, the potential impacts, and Ty will get into that a little bit and talk about how we determine the impacts and what our strategies are. Just a real brief example, you know, in a residential area, as we look at our residents, they don't have the potential to generate nearly as many fats, oils, and greases and add them to the system. And so our strategy for them will involve things like public outreach, education, providing home containers so that they can collect the fats, oils, and greases and dispose of them properly. And then for high impact, we have high impact strategies for our higher impact for the people and establishments that have the potential to add a lot more to the system, like our food service establishments, which is what Ty will touch on. And so that's our goal, is to have the formation of the program be appropriate to the level of impact and engage our response to it that way. And so I'm going to let Ty go ahead and take it from here and just talk about some of the basics of the program, and then we'll take questions after that.
Okay, Ty.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Mayor Lambert and council members. Oh, yeah.
No presentation today.
Sometime we'll get it figured out. Thank you. So yes, here we are again, and I will bring you our proposed changes to Title 5, Chapter 3. So briefly, I'm going to go ahead and go over quickly what is FOG. Like Tyler said, we've been through this a couple times, so I'll touch on that. Again, briefly, just why it's a problem for us. We'll talk briefly about what the current regulations are as far as city code and some others, and then we'll get right into what those proposed changes are. So first of all, we've all heard it by now, fat, oil, and grease is fog. These are some of the things, bacon and other meats. Obviously, we all know that. Oils, that's pretty straightforward. Comes in some other packages, dairy products, butter, deep fried foods. Some things you might not think about as much, sauces and gravies, cheese, these sort of things can pack a pretty big punch. Some salad dressings, those things are little sneaky areas where fog can hide. That picture on the right there is a fume hood over like a flat top grill, and those grates there used to be shiny stainless steel. They obviously are not. This is also fog. This is what ends up happening in our sewer system. This is an 18-inch sewer main here in the city of Moscow that is, as you can see, becoming pretty severely blocked, 60, 70% blockage. And that can easily become a big problem for us. That turns the capacity of that sewer pipe into a much smaller pipe, and like Tyler said, can affect everything upstream there. So this was a disaster averted as well. We were able to get that cleaned out with our equipment. Why it's a problem for us? Again, it's can reduce the hydraulic capacity of our collection system. The water, once it goes down the drains, we want to make sure it makes its way to the treatment plant, and that can obviously impede that. And like Tyler said, repeated cleanings. We've found that the same areas over and over are building up these fog deposits, and so that affects our plan. We're on a cleaning schedule where we want to clean every foot of pipe in the city and make sure that it will convey the wastewater to the treatment plant. Once the fog that doesn't stick to the walls of the sewers does reach the treatment plant, same thing there. There are areas where it builds up continuously. A lot of it is removed and has to be disposed of. It increases our biochemical oxygen demand, which is one of the parameters of our NPDES, the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. That's our EPA-approved permit, and that's something that we have to manage. So I'll talk a little bit about that permit, the NPDES permit there, and part of that says that we have to, at all times, maintain all of the facilities that we use to treat our wastewater. That includes the collection system, the sanitary sewer, the treatment plant itself, and the discharge that we put into Paradise Creek. Currently, city code here maintains that 100 parts per million of fat, oil, and grease is the limit that is to be discharged. And like Tyler said, that applies to everybody. That's to businesses and the residential side as well. Any waste that has a deleterious effect, has a negative effect on our system that can impede our ability to manage that waste is prohibited and has to be pre-treated to an acceptable condition. Where installed, an interceptor, which is something that will capture and hold any of those wastes that we don't want to get into the system, has to be maintained in continuously efficient operation at all times. And here's an example of an underground interceptor that was not maintained in efficient operation. That is untreated sewage on the ground, and that's something we cannot have. So as I get into the proposed changes now, I'm not going to put up everything in your packet. You have all the exact wording, and that's available to everyone, but I will just kind of talk about what those changes are and what they actually mean for us and for those that it might be affected. So here's some of the terms we're going to change or to add to this chapter. The first of those is best management practices, and those are, the code has certain provisions that says you have to do this. Well, the best management practices are exactly how to do that. It's the roadmap. How do you get from here to having those discharges that are acceptable. And then some terms involving interceptors and exactly what that is. Like I said, it's essentially a device that will trap and hold the negative items or the negative stuff that we don't want coming into the system. And then obviously we're talking about grease, so a grease interceptor is pertinent there as well. So as we get into some of the changes here, the first one in Section 331, that will give us the authority to specifically require the installation of interceptors where it's deemed necessary. And for the most part, like we've talked about, that's going to involve food service establishments and other food production facilities. It states that it must be a type and size that it's approved, and that's based on plumbing code. And it must be in a location that's suitable for maintenance. So, tucking it under a sink with a bunch of plumbing in front of it is not going to work. It gives us the authority, to establish these best management practices that we talked about. Lets us, and those are going to be fully enforceable under the code. Those are, like I said, those will give us the exact steps to take to follow the requirements. This one just says, that it must be maintained in continuously efficient operation at all times, in accordance with those established best management practices. And failure to do so can result in enforcement actions. This section here, Section E, there are a lot of additives that are available out there that claim, some of them are enzymatic or bacterial or chemical actors that can have an effect. They can work on the fat itself and emulsify it or break it down into its parts and pass that through the interceptors so that it actually makes them ineffective. And that's those will be prohibited because, like we said, we want those to be trapped and held so that it can be removed and not pass through into the system. Now we get on to the part that is less fun here, the violations and penalties here. One thing we want to talk about is, before we get into any of this stuff, we're going to go through a lot of steps to come into compliance. That's our goal here, is to come into compliance and make sure that our systems, the collections and the treatment systems, are working properly at all times. This first section allows the city to recover any costs associated with violation of this code. And so right now I'm going to have Tyler kind of talk a little bit about the other side of it.
I wanted to just step in real quick and just discuss briefly one of the items that was recommended by the council in our previous discussions on this topic was that we generate a plan for recognition, some sort of carrot to go along with the stick, because obviously any proposal that we make, we've got to have some way to enforce this if it's something that's important for our infrastructure. That's something that we really like the recommendation. We've worked on that. We had several internal discussions and also had discussions with some of the food service establishments that will be affected by these rules and talked to them about what would be a recognition that would mean something to them, what would be a meaningful thing. Because if we're going to do that, we want to make sure that it's something that works for them, something that they're interested in. And what we found was that we were perhaps being a little bit too narrow and too myopic with our approach to that. We've been working on water conservation and have a water conservation plan that we hope to bring to the council soon. And there are other environmental programs that we have that we try and push within the city. And so the direction that we're going now is we're trying to formulate a program, and a lot of this was based on feedback that we received from some of these food service establishments. But we'd like to come back to the council in the near future with a program that will be some sort of environmental stewardship award that will take into account several of those things. So perhaps we will have a list of criteria for water conservation and for compliance with the fog regulation, those sorts of things, perhaps storm runoff and things like that they may want to look at. And so we're in the process now of generating a list of criteria. One of the ideas that came up as we discussed this with our Public Works Director, Les McDonald, was perhaps making it a tiered system so that we could include residences, businesses of different levels, and have some sort of City of Moscow Environmental Stewardship Award that could be given. And so that's the direction we're heading right now. And so we're really looking forward to fleshing that idea out and bringing that forward. As Ty mentioned, our goal with anything that we do is to educate. We don't want to show up and have the first time people hear about this be us showing up heavy-handed with a penalty. We want to explain the whys of the program, explain why it's important, and offer ourselves as resources. And so the implementation will be done in that manner. And so with that in mind, I'll let Ty continue to talk about how we plan to do that and where it all shakes out.
Thanks, Tyler. And that's exactly right. Like Tyler said before, we want to come at this as allies. We're working in this together to maintain our system and to reach the goal of that. With that in mind, we anticipate a lot of cooperation. I think for the most part, this is going to be pretty easy to roll out, and we're going to get a lot of support. There's always the chance that we won't. And that there might be people that want to resist these any changes that they'd have to make in their operations. Before we get to any of this stuff, like I said, there will be a lot of administrative things that we will do before we ever think about issuing an infraction or fines. And so I'll talk about that now. And these changes here are something that Rod Hall, our attorney, talked about in the council workshop, and they're going to really kind of streamline. It's an efficient and fair way if we get to this point for the judicial side of this here. So the first violation, once we get to that point, will be an infraction, and that's going to be like a speeding ticket. And that first fine will be for $100 for that first violation. If there's another violation within 5 years, that fine will jump up to $300. If in that same 5-year period this continues and we're still not getting cooperation, then it will jump up to that next tier and be moved forward with a misdemeanor charge. This last change here is a pretty standard liability protection for the city and for staff. So the next steps. Pending approval of these changes, we would like to begin implementation of the fog reduction program in early 2016. That will start with an outreach and some initial education to let everyone know that that's coming. Like Tyler said, we're not going to jump in and start swinging a stick. We'd be happy to move forward as partners with our community. So, if there are any questions, we'd be happy to field them now.
Before council takes questions and answers here, Ty and Tyler, what I wanted to tell you, this is not a public hearing, but I have full intentions of asking anybody in the audience if they want to speak on this once council has discussed it before we vote on this thing, to see if there's interest, because this is something that will affect anybody that has a house, whether it's a house or an apartment and or a business or whatever. So I just wanted everybody to know that. With that, I'll be more happy to any questions for Ty or Tyler from councilors. Walter.
Thank you, Mayor. Tyler, the effective date of this is with its passage, Gary? Does it have to be published?
Yes, it has to be published.
So it'd be effective with the publication, should it be passed tonight?
If it's passed, it'll be published, and it'll have the publication date and the effective date in the ordinance.
Okay, Mr. Mayor?
Continue.
Included in our packet is a best management practices draft manual. Are we adopting that tonight? Are we expected to adopt it, or does it just come about as a product of the ordinance?
I believe that will be, and maybe Les, maybe you'd like to speak to that.
Go ahead, Les. Is Les going to talk, or is Rod?
Excuse me. The ordinance revisions tonight would grant the authority to adopt a best management practices document. This draft was prepared to show what that might look like. I suspect that we would probably want to spend a little more time refining this just a bit further and then bring it back for council adoption if there's a desire to do that.
And if I may, to follow that up, and there's no wording necessary in the ordinance I'm not sure, I'm not sure the ordinance speaks specifically to a manual. It talks about the Public Works Director as designee creating best management practices. Does there need to be a direct reference to the manual itself? And I understand you to say that it'll be coming back for our approval of the manual itself.
Yeah, I suspect what we'd end up doing is, the language that is here would be that I would have the authority to approve it, but we would want to bring it back to council to show what the final version is, similar to what we do with other policy-type documents that we've created as guidance manuals.
Okay, so we won't need to approve it. It'll come back as
Another item.
a presented item.
Essentially as a report, as a presented item.
Okay, sound good.
Thank you.
Okay.
We saw this in workshops,
Yep.
several times, so,
Well, this was on November 23rd. We had, it went before the workshop in council. We had a workshop in September, I think, or end of August, somewhere along the way.
It was in September, yes.
I don't have the exact date where we'd had a regular council workshop in this very council room.
Public Works and Finance.
Well, we had a Public Works and
Last.
Finance on the 23rd of
Yeah.
November. So, is there anybody in the public out here who'd like to comment on this? I'd be more than happy to take any type of testimony or concerns you may have. Well, please come up, state your name, address. I'll give you a couple of minutes, and tell us what's on your mind, sir.
My name is Corey Bose. I live at 1060 Wallen Road, and all I really had was a quick question. What would be the approximate cost of installing these?
Interceptors?
Yes, thanks. And would that cost be carried by the city, or would it fall upon the small business owners? Thank you.
I think that's something, Tyler, you want to, or Ty, either one of you. And I think my guess is it's going to be very price dependent upon how big of a circumstance and so on and so forth. And I'm going to let you guys talk about that because I have no idea on capacity.
Yeah, that is correct. It will vary. And on the low end, for a small under-sink trap, in the 20-pound, that can handle 20 pounds of waste type capacity, that's in the a couple $100. If you get on the bigger side for a large full-service restaurant or fast food joint, the big underground ones, like the one that I showed that was overflowing, that's in the several thousands. That would be borne by the owner. That is not a city borne cost. And what we have decided on is there will be a 12-month period, or this is what we had bounced around, 12-month time period to implement that, to have that installed. So again, not something we want to come in and just say, you don't have this, you need it tomorrow. Get to it. So
I'll make a point on that too. There are some facilities in this town that already have inceptors. They're called grease traps. For example, Safeway, they've had one for 40 years that I know of. Was that in the old store where the co-op is now, and in the store when it was built in 1978 at East Side Mall, because I was the manager there, and that thing gets pumped out periodically all the time. But so there, and I'm sure that there's other stores as well and other facilities that have these things now. I can't give you a list of them, but I can tell you that one because I worked there. So,
if I may, Your Honor. Yeah, as Ty said, and you're absolutely right. There are many of these establishments that already have these in place, and for those, this will function as a means for inspection. We don't have a mechanism to inspect them and to make sure they're being maintained at this point, and that's what this does. It gives us a mechanism, and it gives us the authority to do the inspections, and so that we can make sure they are being maintained. Ty mentioned our plan for implementation for people who may not have one, that may need one. Is to have 12 months, and that 12 months wouldn't be from date of adoption. The 12 months would be from date of when we go, we do an inspection, we determine what's needed, we work with them so they understand very clearly what they need, and that's when that period would start. We wanted to allow a grace period so they can say, okay, now I know what's needed, I can budget for this, and so we allow that period for compliance.
Tyler, I have another question for you. Could you give us some examples of other cities that have this? Because there's other cities that have this.
You know,
Could you-
time might be better to do that. We did a lot
Okay,
of
well, it
research
doesn't,
for
I
this.
don't care, either one of you. So you can give, just so the audience knows that this goes on in other places, this isn't something we just came up with here in good old Moscow, Idaho for,
Sure. This is all very common. You know, I worked a lot with the city of Boise and with Lewiston, and I've looked at codes everywhere from North Carolina to Seattle. So this is very common. This is not an issue, like you said, that just started here that we came up with. This is all pretty standard industry wide.
okay. Walter, you had your hand up. Is it?
Yes, sir, Mayor, thank you. Regarding the 12 months to install when it's determined that a business or a residence needs to install a grease trap or a grease interceptor, the 12-month period, does that need to be codified?
Is that a question for Rod? Rod, would you be the one who
On this would be
I
talking.
think Rod's position is going to be, y'all tell me if you want it codified and I'll write it.
Yeah, right now it's a policy position that the city's position is that that's what they're recommending, that it's going to take them is 12 months to go through this. It doesn't say that hard and fast under the black letter of the law. It's
Well,
just
it's not
that
in
that's
the
the way that they're
ordinance.
going to. Yeah, it's not in the ordinance saying that's 12 days or 12 months. That's just the policy that they're going to do to implement it since it's new.
Would that be something that would be at the same time on this booklet, best practice booklet? Would that be something in the best practice booklet that's going to be coming in front of council? That might be the time to put it in there, Gary.
It could be. It's a discretionary thing. Typically, what you have is you have enabling legislation that allows regulations to be promulgated by the, in this case, it'd be the Public Works Director. The situation you get into with, if you codify something like this, if you have someone who is a big producer of fats, oils, and grease that is causing an issue, the EPA doesn't regulate the fats, oils, and grease except at the wastewater treatment plant. When it's discharged, it can only have 100 parts per million or less. So it's up to us to try and keep these from entering the waste stream. So if you have someone, and it's your practice to give them a year to do it, it's up to the enforcing agency to be willing to do that. But if someone, for instance, opens up a business, they're severely impacting the fat, oil, and grease input, you want to be able to move on that more quickly than a year. But if the policy is a year, then it's up to the discretion of the agency to be able to enforce that.
So,
Good, Walter.
so you're recommending that it not be codified?
No, I'm recommending that it be discretionary with the agency.
Okay. Comment down here. And I plan on asking more public input, so that's one thing. Anybody else want to come up? And come on up, Gina. Identify yourself and your address and tell us what's on your mind.
I'm Gina Terusio, and my address is 1223 East E, but I'm here with my chamber hat on tonight. How long have we been talking about this? A couple years, really? So the reason I'm standing up to visit with you this evening quickly is that we have, from the beginning, worked as a team to try and figure out the solution to this fog problem. And I really want to applaud the efforts that have been made, because the steps have been very deliberate and very careful and very measured. And I think, adding that to the concept of having kind of the discretionary facet of this is going to be a really good thing, because I've watched these guys be as deliberate and careful and aware of the stresses and the potential monetary impact to business definitely through the last couple of years. So I am optimistic that this is going to be a very positive thing in our community.
Okay, thank you, Gina. Dan's got a question.
So basically what I'm hearing from Gina is that this isn't a surprise to anybody out there, that, everybody that's at least a chamber member knows that this is coming down the pipe, so to speak, or not. But anyhow, they all do know that this is happening.
Well,
so I think that we're not pulling a fast one on anybody.
No, and, with that being said, a lot of corporate structures out there, I mentioned Safeway earlier, they'd be saying, wow, this hasn't been an ordinance. They'd be shocked that it wasn't, because of it being in other areas for a number of years. So
I know, too, that Ty and Kyle and Tyler have all been visiting with the key businesses that would be impacted by this sort of an ordinance, and have kept them in the loop from day one. So if it wasn't me, it was one of these three guys, keeping everybody very, very well informed. So this will be no surprise.
Okay. John?
Yeah, Gary mentioned that he did not want to have this codified, and he also said that it would be up to the overseeing agency to decide whether it's done in a year or whether it's done in a month. Is that, do I have that right, Gary?
No, I think what I'm recommending is that the policy would be a year. But if you get into a situation where something is severely impacting the system, then you could go earlier. It's just this is our practice to do this unless you're causing some sort of larger problem. And it's been the practice, too, that if you codify something like that where you say it's a year for any business, many times the business won't make moves to do anything till the 11th month. So it's just a matter of keeping everybody, letting them know what the practice is, everybody practices good faith, and then you get it done within that year period.
So with that being said, our guys go out and inspect it, and there's this huge problem. We're going to have to say, look, you folks are going to have to fix this right away. This is something we can't be waiting for a year or 10 months or 9 months or 6 months. This is something you need to really get on and get fixed right away, or we're going to have to know why it can't be done. Sure. That sort of idea. John, did you have other?
No, I'm coughing myself to death here.
I think that most businesses that are fat oil and grease producers have been required to have a trap for a long time, and most of the problems associated with not maintaining them properly or doing things to get grease through them instead of trying to capture it and pump it out. And I think this will kind of bring that home, that you can't just have the trap and then never clean it out. You have to maintain it. You have to not put things down because it impacts other people besides just you. So I think it's a good policy, and we probably should approve it.
And yes, if you have a trap, they smell. I can tell you that. You do them early in the morning when nobody's around because it's not a pleasant odor that's in these things. Do I have other folks that would like to come up and talk in front of us that we haven't heard from yet? Okay, I'll move back on to the council. Dan?
You know what, I'd like to make a motion, Your Honor, that we approve the ordinance adopting amendments to Moscow City Code Title V, Chapter 3, under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary.
Second that motion.
Okay, I've got a motion by Dan and a second by Jim to approve the ordinance adopting the amendments of Moscow City Code Title V, Chapter 3, under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, that it be read and by title and published by summary. Further discussion before I call the roll? Seeing none, I'll start with Walter.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Excuse me, aye.
Okay. We have a new ordinance. It's ordinance number 20-1517. Okay, an ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the State of Idaho, providing for the amendment of Moscow City Code Title V, Chapter 3, providing for the additional definitions, providing for the implementation of best management practices, to enact the provisions of this chapter, providing for the preventions of introduction of additives to interceptors which may cause interference or pass-through, providing for an efficient and fair mechanism to enforce the provisions of this ordinance, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, and providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from the date of its passage, approval, and publication according to law. With that, I had to read it about 3 times today to get that, because I was like, wow, I thought my eyeballs were going crazy with it. Okay, well, thank you very much, Ty and Tyler, for your nice presentation. You bet. Okay, the next item is item number 7, downtown restroom design approval by Dwight Curtis. Before Dwight gets started, this was a council goal several years back, and there's been a lot of discussion on this. So with that, Dwight, podium's yours.
Oh, good evening. Well, as you just said, this was a 2014 city council goal, and that was to install a restroom in the public restroom in the downtown area. And so a committee was formed, a steering committee, and we took it from there to come up with what you're hearing tonight. And of course, it was the goal was the Parks and Recreation Director, with the assistance from other city staff, will develop a process to solicit public input from stakeholders from the location or for the location and design of the restroom facility, and develop a plan for funding by March 1st of 2014. So we're right on target. The steering committee consisted of Gina Terusio from the Chamber of Commerce, Melinda Schaub from Moscow Food Co-op, Grace Burnett from New St. Andrews, Walter Steed from the City Council, Kathleen Burns with the Arts, as well as Farmers Market, Mike Ray with Community Development, and myself. And of course, our strategy was to identify the possible locations, the style, whether that be a design build or a prefab, a traditional or modern, what kind of facility facade it would have, of course, the cost estimates, and a funding plan, which, as you already know, $170,000 was approved in the fiscal year 16 budget for a facility, and of course, going through the design process. We went through quite an extensive effort to find options for location of this. And of course, we had to find out if or decide whether this would be a standalone facility or go into an existing facility where we could possibly purchase or lease space that exists. And Friendship Square was kept coming back as the primary focus. Looked at where the water fountain is, adjacent to the Friendship Square proper, and of course the Jackson Street parking lot area. And then in general, the farmers market area, we looked at every nook and cranny there was. And in the end, this was our conclusion. And this is Friendship Square right here. And that's the 4th Street. And there's the Jackson Street. And this is as best I could with my little gizmo, the where the restroom facility would be. And here's a little closer picture. There's 4th Avenue there. There are parking spaces that currently exist. That's the extra wide sidewalk that currently exists. And here is the restroom facility. Friendship Square is off to the northwest of that. And this uses about 4 parking spaces. Just another view of this. This is looking at it from just across the parking lot, or across the drive from where Friendship Square is. And there's that sidewalk. Jackson Street's in the background. And this facility would be right here.
That tree come out, Dwight?
Yes. And I think we're moving that
Pole
power,
out
the light pole as well. Sorry. Having a meltdown here. Too many gizmos. The facility style, we determined that this needed to be a standalone facility based on where the location was. We wanted to go with the traditional type of facility, type of building. The facade, looking at a brick, kind of a used brick facade, and also that this would have gender-specific sides and 2 toilets per side. This here is an example of the facility, except that's split face, but this would be the veneer. And so you can see the wings on it.
That brick, look, Dwight's that go where that other cinder block is. Is that what you're pointing out?
It would, yes. It would. This would all be yes. And we also, sorry, I couldn't find one with a shed roof, but it would have a shed roof. You'll see that in the next few slides. Here's an aerial view. These are those privacy wings, and the 2 sides with the restrooms or the toilets. Plumbing alley, a little bit of storage in the center. This is the shed roof I was talking about, a side view. These are the privacy wings out here.
Dwight, at
Yes,
East
sir.
City Park, that restroom we built has a shed roof.
Yes.
Would this have the same amount of pitch to it as that one,
no,
or less?
No. That one was designed specifically because of someday for a stage to go behind it. And so that the back side of that building was designed specifically for an addition to it. This would be considerably less pitch. Another side angle, but sliced away so you can see inside how that would look. Drinking fountains on the outside here. Frontal view. And, of course, this is the part that is always of interest. And the estimate from the designer, which Design West, out of Pullman, using a 5% contingency, was $157,710. We did a cost comparison using prefab models, and the Montrose that you see there is very similar in footprint to the one that we had done by Design West, and you can see the price is very close. But we also understood that these are, it is very expensive. So what would the prices be for some smaller facilities? So looked at a two toilet or two single-use facility, and it's about $87,500, and which is about half. You also have half the toilets, and then there was mention sometime back about possibly adding in singles, and so I included that, and you can see there's not a lot of price reduction on a single as compared to a double, but it's still about $76,000, $77,000 for a prefab. The Parks and Recreation Commission, the Farmers Market Commission, and the Historic that's historic, not historical, Preservation Commission and the Steering Committee all recommended that the City Council adopt the design by Design West. We thought that it met all of the conditions that we originally came up with, and so tonight the recommendation that also came from the Public Works Finance Committee was acceptance of the downtown restroom design produced by Design West. And I am here to answer any questions you might have.
Wayne, Public Works and Finance Committee heard this on November 23rd. Would you like to comment on that?
We had pretty much the same report at that particular committee meeting that Dwight gave us tonight. At the same time, we also heard from representatives from the Historical Preservation Commission as well as the Farmers Market Commission, and they expressed their desires to go with the one from Design West. And so even though we still struggled with the cost of $157,000, it's cheaper than, by a little bit, it's cheaper than the prefabs, I guess, if you want to call them that. So we moved it forward to council for full council discussion on that, but I think pretty much the Public Works and Finance recommended going with the Design West design.
Art. Yeah, does it have a heater in there?
Yes, this would have a heater.
So it's a 365-day-a-year.
Yes.
You know, that's the first time I heard that, Art. I think that's a good
I'm
point.
not spending the night down there. Also, relative to the facade design, other than the used red brick look, does it have any other architectural details that would fit in with some of the existing buildings in downtown? Or is it just a plain vertical wall with some vertical bricks at the top and that's it?
The other design aspect of this, that the only other one that really fits in with the other, or this was meant to fit in with the other facilities, is the pitch or the shed roof, because there are no pitched roofs in the downtown area, and so I think there's some little bit of design work that goes along just above and below the brick veneer, but it's more just for looks, but it's not to match with other facilities.
That brick veneer is the whole idea behind it, so it was aesthetic to the rest of the downtown, so it looked like it fit in rather than a sore
Yes.
thumb out there. It looked like it made sense, and it would be nice looking in relationship to other buildings and in proximity where it's at downtown.
Yeah, because I think that's pretty important, is to make it look like it fits in with downtown rather than being plopped down like an exit from the interstate. So good. So let's hope they follow through and make it look as good as a restroom can look.
John?
Well, I got a couple problems with this. Number one, it seems that we're back to the point where we're buying a Cadillac when maybe a Ford or a Chevy would probably work just as well and also cost considerably less. And I think that the roof on this thing makes it look essentially like most of the backyard sheds we already have in Moscow. It doesn't really do anything as far as the look of downtown. What we're doing is we're kind of putting lipstick on a pig. When you're all done, you still got a pig. And I think that we ought to take a look at finding out. I asked Dwight earlier, and he couldn't tell me, what is the difference between putting the brick facade on and not putting the brick facade on. And the other one was, what is the difference between having a 412 pitch or a 212 pitch with a red roof instead of the roof that has been proposed, and because that in a large part is what, in my estimation, makes it look just like a shed that we dressed up. And it's been said that we've only had one chance to do this right. Well, I think we've got a lot of chances to do it right. If it doesn't work out, things can be changed as you go along. But I personally, I can't support this.
Okay. Dan?
Well, we're not putting lipstick on a pig, we're putting brick veneer on a outhouse, so. But we're still gonna end up with a restroom when we're done. I mean, that's all there is to it. I mean, we gotta get it, we're getting as close as we can, I think, with what we got, really, as far as we're building a restroom. And that's, you know, like you said, you can only do so much. It's still a restroom downtown. And, you know, we've been asked for it for years. Sue Scott was still on council when it first popped up on the radar as far as a council goal. You know, I think we need to move forward with it, and I think this is the best design that is probably out there. You know, I thought maybe we would be able to save money with the prefab, but you know, obviously we see that that's not the case. We're not reaching our budgeted number, so we at least are staying under budget that way. Hopefully that continues to be the case, but I do think that we need to move forward with it.
Walter?
I hear you, John. I truly do. A downtown public restroom in Moscow has been a goal of mine for 20 years, ever since I started seeing them overseas. I think we really need one. The businesses either for some reason or other can't or aren't willing to make their indoor restrooms available to the public, and I certainly understand the reasons that we run into for that. I think we need it. I'm not totally convinced that we need a four-holer when I realized that when Farmers Market is operating for 5 hours, 26 Saturdays, there's more people will be needing restrooms than will any other time, but this is a 24-hour a day. Well, maybe you're going to lock it off at night.
We'll lock it off at
It'll
night.
be a 12-hour a day, 365 day a year facility that's available to the public and won't have that much demand. I have real reservations about whether or not the bids can hit the architect's estimate and the money available in the budget. So I'm going to vote for it, somewhat reluctantly, totally pretty much on price. But if it doesn't make the number and comes back, I'm going to raise my objections to what we're trying to build and see if I can find a way to get more on John's side and try to find a way to get it within a number we've already got budgeted and get her built.
You know, there's a point I want to make, and you, Walter, you make a good point there, and the public needs to understand this. The council is trying to be as frugal as possible. All of us up here know we need to have a restroom downtown. That's a no-brainer. We know we need to do that. And so we got to try to make it the best-looking thing possible for what we have. And I respect the council's position on, being frugal about what we can do. None of us really want to spend a bunch of money, but do we have to do it? Yes. I mean, it's the way we're going to head. And it's going to be something, once it's done, it's going to be there for a long, long time. And so we got to get it right the first time, in my view. So appreciate the comments, Walter. Jim.
Yeah, I understand the concerns about the cost as well. It seems like an awful lot of money for an outhouse. But institutional construction is not inexpensive. If you build it sturdy to last a long time, and it costs more money. That's just the way institutional construction is. And the cost, if you take the $157,000 and say, let's say this structure is going to last 50 years, and then divide it by 23,000 residents of Moscow, that's about 15 cents a person a year is what it's going to cost us. So when you look at it in that perspective, it doesn't seem quite so expensive. It might be upfront cost looks expensive, but if you amortize it out over the life of the building, it's probably not costing us that much. If you had to put 50 cents in every time you used it, it would be much more expensive.
There's a thought.
Pay restrooms.
Good point.
That's a way to pay for it, I suppose.
Wayne?
Well, everybody's pretty much brought up what I was going to say. John, I understand what you're saying. I'm still appalled at $157,000. I made that comment at Public Works and Finance. My goodness, you can build an entry-level family home for that kind of money, and here we're building a 2-stall restroom. John, if I thought that we could save a substantial amount of money by building a basic unit, I could probably discuss that a little bit deeper, but I think by leaving the facade off and whatever angle you change the pitch, or if you put on a pitched roof, I don't think you're going to save that much money. If we could save $50,000, I would think that would be a substantial thing to discuss, but I'm not so sure you'd save $10,000 or $20,000. The mayor brings up a very good point, as did Jim, and that is that this facility will be sitting where it's at 50 years from now. And we want to do it right, and we want to do it right the first time, because downtown Moscow is becoming more and more utilized by all kinds of different functions. The beautification of the downtown continues to improve. It's going to be a shining example, and I think we need to have a restroom there that isn't going to be a negative effect. And if you look at 30 years down the road, what it would cost to tear it down and then build another one, that price is really going to be high. So, as much as I'm still appalled at $157,000, I think we first talked $140,000. I didn't even like that number, but I'll go along with it. So, with that, I think I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance adopting. That's the wrong one. Let's get down to the right one here. Make a motion to recommend approval of the downtown restroom design produced by Design West.
I'll second, or I'll let Art second it.
Okay, Wayne made a motion, seconded by Art, to approve the downtown restroom design produced by Design West. I'll start the roll with you, Walter.
Aye.
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 No.
Okay. Okay, we're going to move forward with it with Design West, so.
Thank you.
Very welcome. Thank you, Dwight. We'll move on to the next thing, number 8, Solid Waste Agreement Extension Amendment. Tim Davis, if you would please come up, sir. How you doing tonight, Tim?
Good. Good evening, Mayor. Council.
Ordinance here, we're going to look at it again.
Staff was directed by City Council at the September 19th, 2015 council meeting to prepare necessary documents to extend the current solid waste franchise agreement with Latah Sanitation from September 30, 2023 to September 30 of 2035. City Council on April 6, 2015 also approved the proposal for Latah Sanitation for modification of services for the single-stream curbside recycling, resulting in necessary amendments to Exhibit D of the solid waste franchise agreement relating to curbside collection of recyclables. Before you this evening is an ordinance amending Exhibit D and the term and renewal section of that non-exclusive solid waste franchise agreement. The amendments to Exhibit D consists of a description of responsibilities related to the new single-stream curbside recycling collection program in Section 2 titled Type of Service, a description of recycling roll cart assignment responsibilities in Section 3 titled Equipment, and the elimination of the former Section 12 titled Curbside Collection Recycling Bins. The amendment to the solid waste franchise agreement consists of language in Section 13 titled Terms and Renewals, extending that term to expire September 30, 2035. The ordinance was reviewed by Public Works Finance Committee on October 12, 2015, and introduced to City Council on October 19, 2015. Publication was made in the Moscow-Pullman Daily News on November 7, 2015. Legal advised that no action be taken on these items until 30 days following introduction to City Council. The 30-day period has passed, and Council may now take action regarding this ordinance.
Okay, Public Works and Finance saw this on October 12th and came and was introduced to the council on October 19th, which we had quite the discussion, so.
Public Works and Finance did look at that on the 12th, and here again, Tim explained it pretty much as he did tonight. The only addition that we had is Walter had brought up a suggestion that under the specifications that color be included.
Actually, I cannot take full credit for that. I said it, but that was because the council member who asked me to bring it up wasn't sitting that day.
Okay,
So
well,
it's been put in.
Okay.
at any rate, it's in there, so.
We're all about color.
Color.
Art.
Anybody have any comments during the comment period?
Not that I'm aware of.
Your turn.
Okay, I'll make the motion. So, to approve the ordinance adopting amendments and extension of the 2003 solid waste franchise agreement under suspension of the rules requiring 3 separate and complete readings, and it be read by title and published by summary.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion by Art, a second by Dan to approve the ordinance adapting the amendments and extension of the 2003 solid waste franchise agreement under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary. I will start the roll. John.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
And aye.
Okay, so that was on 6-0.
Mayor, may
Yes.
I ask a question of
Yep,
Tim
absolutely.
while he's at the podium? The latest and greatest projected date for starting the single-stream recycling is the first one, and second one is, do you have any knowledge of anyone's ability to have made a sale of any of the incorrectly ordered totes for single-stream?
The latest and greatest starting date it's looking like February 1. It looks like the last order or the last truckload of carts are scheduled to get here first week in January. So they'll begin distributing those to customers. I'm told that'll take 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a little over 3 weeks. With the holidays, that's going to kind of mess up a couple of weekends for deliveries of carts, which is fine. We've waited this long. February 1st looks like a good start date, though. It will be the beginning of a month, and they should have their carts by mid-January. They can start filling them and have them picked up the first week of February.
So first collection would not be till the first week of February,
First week of February. February 1st would be the first day.
if I may.
Okay, go ahead, Walter.
When Lewiston distributed their carts, I read in the paper down there that people started using them the moment they got them almost.
And that will be the case here, too.
Are you going to try to do something to, I guess people will figure out if they roll them out to the curb and they don't go anywhere, they aren't being picked up yet. But
We have put together information packets stating that they will not be collected until the first week of February, and that was just basically finalized today. So we're busy putting together information packets that will be delivered with the carts. And Pullman had the same problem. They started delivering theirs months before they started, and they were set out almost immediately. And that's part of the trick, is to get those things out as quick as we can before collection starts, because it's when people get them, they're going to start using them.
Yep. Dan had a question.
Tim, there was some talk about change in collection dates and routes. Has that all started or been finalized yet as far as the changes there?
The new routes are going to start, I can't remember the date, I believe it was January 10th, and they are going to supply door hangers to the folks that will be affected by day changes, and it amounted to about 400 or 450, if I recall. Yeah, not a lot.
And then Walter's question about the resale.
To my knowledge, there has not been any carts resold yet. I do know that Andy Boyd spoke with the folks down in the McCall area, and there was some interest in them from those folks, but they're not quite there yet. So, we've got our feelers out looking all the time, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I have an ordinance to read, 2015-18. Lori? Okay. Ordinance number 2015-18, an ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the State of Idaho, amending Exhibit D relating to single-stream curbside collection of recyclables and the terms and renewals section of non-exclusive solid waste franchise agreement with Lato Sanitation Incorporated, granted pursuant to the Moscow City Ordinance number 20003-07 and amended by the council. Approval of the extension of an amendment to 20003 solid waste agreement on April 15th of 2015, providing that that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable and providing that this ordinance be in full force and effect from the date of its passage, approval, and publication according to law. Okay, we'll move on to item number 9, which
We
is...
have to vote on that, Mr. Mayor?
No, it's already been voted on.
Okay.
We did, and then we talked some more. And then
We voted on it and approved it.
That's right.
Then we got in some questions to interrupt things.
Yeah, so Walter wanted to ask a few questions, but I needed to make sure I remembered to read the ordinance because it's an important thing to do. Okay, item number 9, presentation of the City of Moscow Strategic Plan and Operation. Overview, Gary, you have the podium, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Bill, could you get the light? Thank you. Mayor and Council, I'm happy to present the strategic planning document to you tonight. We'll talk about it in a moment. You should have 3 documents that will be in the office of the city clerk. They'll also be posted to the website after approval by the city council. First is the strategic plan itself, this impressive-looking 3-ring binder, as well as the executive summary, which we will go through today on the strategic planning effort. And lastly, a document that originally was not contemplated in this effort, but was intended to help apprise the council of the operations that city departments engage in every day, as well as a document that can be available to the public so that When the public sees city crews out, wonders what does the city supervisor do in a day, or the city clerk or anybody else can look in this document and see the whole bunch of things, the day-to-day activities that these departments engage in. So hopefully it'll remove a little bit of the mystery of what goes on at City Hall and in city operations. So the intent is to help educate the public and put them in a position where they understand the workings of their city government, as well as mapping out the differences, the priorities, and the resources that the city has. So we'll go through this. We'll be as brief as we can, but we're going to move along fairly quickly. We started this process in October of 2014. In August of that year, we'd identified a consultant to assist us with the process. That was Dr. John Luthi of the Futures Corporation of Boise, and we identified him to help us with it. And that was in October 1st of 2014. We had stakeholder kickoff meetings, and then we moved on down through the different meetings that you see listed in front of you. Major challenge areas is where we ended up at a council workshop on May 12th of 2015, which assisted us to develop the FY 2016 budget and will help us hopefully to guide our processes in the future as well. The idea is that this document is plan-based but fact-driven. In other words, we've talked about planning for years, but we want our plans to be driven by what is actually out there in the field. So when we started a process back in 2002 and 2003, we engaged in a strategic planning process at that time. Actually, what it told us is that we were doing a pretty good job of anticipating and meeting city and community needs on about a 1 to 3 year basis, typically following election cycles. But that wasn't the case. It wasn't the case that they were driven by elections as much as they were driven by a lack of continuing resources. We did not have master plans for a lot of our operations at that time. And so that strategic plan basically talked about you need to show where you are and where you want to go in your individual operations before you can prioritize those operations against each other when divvying up what, as you know, are pretty lean resources for a city of Moscow's size, with property tax limitations that we have imposed by the legislature, lack of a local option sales tax, so on and so forth. So those plans that you see in front of you, from the master facilities plan, which will be presented to you next week, or excuse me, in 2 weeks, just had a couple of tweaks to it that we cleaned up. It was presented in a workshop earlier this fall, and it will come back to you for approval. These other plans that you see in front of you, there's only one that's missing at this point, and that is a long-range financial plan. It'd be easy to blame Don Palmer wholly for that, but I will take some of the responsibility myself. That should be Don's not here, so
Too busy getting awards.
He gets the blame. At any rate, that will be ready in the next couple months. But as you can see, each of those plans has been reviewed and accepted by the City Council. And there is a ton of documentation in those plans. And as you also know, each of those plans carries a price tag for the facilities and the personnel resources to implement all of those plans to the utmost. It'd be a huge number if you calculated all of them together. That's the job of the long-range financial plan. But at least now we have a baseline to go from, and we have a long-range outlook. Yes, sir?
Dan's got a question.
Going back then, before we get to these, all these plans that we've adopted before the strategic plan, is there going to be a lot of effect that we need to go back to those to make them fit the strategy, basically?
I think what you'll see is the long-range financial plan will take each of the financial projections, the necessities of each of these plans. We'll put those in the long-range financial plan, and we'll just have to work backwards. Each of these, as you know, the sewer system, water system, sanitation are enterprise funds driven by rates. A lot of these other ones are driven by other things, and mostly general fund, property taxes, grants, that sort of thing. So we've got a whole bunch of different ways to do this, but in essence, you're exactly right. What will happen is each of the priorities will be weighed against other priorities, and the council will make decisions on where they want those dollars to be spent.
So these plans are where we're getting our major challenge areas.
Exactly. So there's been a ton of work over the last dozen years leading up to this point. So a lot of work's been done that isn't reflected in this presentation tonight.
Well, the good news is all those plans that have had dust built on them over the years were
Some of
actually
them have. Some of them have
implemented,
are in various stages of implementation. But that, in essence, is our strategic planning library. And those documents will be available on the web. They'll be available at City Hall, at the city clerk's office, for anybody who wants to check on what is going on in the planning world and how we're approaching these problems. When I say problems, looking out, instead of looking at the 1 to 3 year time line, we're really trying to look out 5, 10, and 20 year time frames, and even beyond that in some of these plans.
Challenge areas.
Exactly.
We're learning things from this guy.
There you go. And you're teaching me the other way. Okay, strategic planning documents. You got your operational overviews that I talked about, the executive summary, which I would encourage everybody to read and the public to take a look at. And if you want to dig deeper than that, the plans themselves. As you know from the plans are extremely detailed. They were prepared by the departments, individual departments who are familiar with the operations and challenges of the city, presented to City Council, and City Council then prioritized the ones that they thought were major. So these were the three major things that drove our trends, and those were the tax implications, and that essentially is what is our revenue source, our major revenue source for the general fund. University of Idaho enrollment, which has been dipping down in recent years, but as the main economic engine of the city of Moscow or the community of Moscow, of very much concern. And unemployment. Are we utilizing our workforce capably? Are they employed to their fullest extent? So there's just in the executive summary, we talked about some of the citywide accomplishments. There's a bunch of them up there. This is a smattering of those. Some of them are from the previous century, the Moscow Volunteer Fire Department. Some of them are extremely recent, such as the Moscow School District Community Playfields. We could have had a list that is as long as the executive summary. These were some of the major ones that came to mind, and some of the ones that were brought up in the strategic plan itself. So, desired legacies. What were we hoping to achieve? What did the council indicate in their interviews with Dr. Luthi that they wanted to leave the community? And that is collaborative and communicative relationships. And I'll just go through these very quickly. I won't read all the slides. A vibrant and healthy business community, appropriate, affordable housing for our citizens, safety, goodwill, and collaborative spirit of the community, a workforce that's innovative and therefore fully employed. Members of business and professional communities are, first of all, they understand and they're happy with city services, that they're getting good value for their tax dollar or rate dollar. Exceptional public management, we feel, is the due of the community. If they deserve to have the policymakers and the professional staff do their jobs to the utmost. Parks and rec opportunities that will have an economic impact, boost business and tourism growth.
Terrorism.
I've been reading too much timely news.
Oh, my.
And improve durable and cost-effective transportation utility infrastructure. And, of course, as we talk about the water plan, the sewer plan, sanitation plan, at any rate, the planning documents, we want to make sure that we're looking at our utility infrastructure and then it's being sized correctly and it's being replaced when it needs to be. Those city priorities flow from those initiatives. Economic development, facilities and infrastructure, revenue resources, equipment, programming, planning, and customer service were the 6 priorities that were identified as being major. And of course, those are huge areas, and the strategic plan boils or at least expands all of these. It's kind of like one of those trees that you have a basic idea and then you have a dozen offshoots on things that feed into that idea. The major challenge areas are things the council looked at. These were the major challenge areas that the council identified in the March and May workshops. You can see on the top, deteriorating pavement conditions were one of the ones that the council put at the top of theirs. Aesthetic condition of the city's main highway entryways. We have projects that are moving ahead with that. Had some in place last year and moving those forward. Inadequate facility inspection, commercial pre-plans for fire. We also talked about the declining enrollment at the University of Idaho as being a big issue, and inadequate law enforcement radio infrastructure and facilities. So declining employment were all major challenge areas. 3 tiers, the most important being Tier 1, and then cascading down Tier 2 and Tier 3.
Yes, Mayor.
Yes.
If I may. Gary, I must have missed it. I know all of those challenge areas are found in the documents, but not in a listing like that. Is that, did I miss it?
No, that was done by council in May.
Should that not?
Well, they're listed in the executive, but not
where you
that
can
format.
where you can look at them like that.
Right.
Yeah, we can certainly add that.
I mean, and if you, just a suggestion, and if you need to date it as approved by council X date, because it will change over time, that would be okay.
Okay.
But I've had a little bit of a struggle checking to see if certain ones or stayed in and all that, and it's a lot of page flipping, and that kind of listing.
Yeah, that fits over about 5 pages in just the executive side.
That'd be very helpful.
I think that makes good sense, and it gives us a way to historically follow which council had these priorities, if they're looked at every year or every couple of years.
And they can be compared.
You bet.
As to how it's moved and what we've accomplished.
Okay.
And I presume an external page and an internal page.
You bet. Okay, and internal, of course, same thing. So we'll go ahead and put those documents together as well. So as you can see, and this is, if you read through the entire document, which I admit is a Herculean task by the time you get through it, these 2 major challenge areas, the internal and external, those were the ones that rose to the top for council consideration. There are lots of internal challenge areas to each department. Things as simple as restructuring the management structure in a department, combining facilities or services, those sorts of things. So it is a comprehensive document. Okay, strategic initiatives. I want to hit each of these very quickly because it shows some of the things that we intend to do and things we are doing now. The community brand for economic development, that's currently undergoing right now. Comprehensive economic development plans. We are putting together, we'll bring it to council hopefully in January. We've been reporting on the Partnership for Economic Prosperity. It is moving along, albeit slowly. It'll come to council for approval, consideration, and approval. Economics impacts of the U of I to the local economy, as I indicated before. Historically, the U of I and its students have been the driver of this economy. We respect that and want to foster that, but we also want to be able to survive in times of downturn as well. So we want to have a more robust economy that has a little more stability. Inter-entity cooperation, economic development efforts. That's the PEP effort that I just indicated. That will involve the business community, Chamber of Commerce, University of Idaho, Latah County, and of course the City of Moscow and the other incorporated cities in Latah County. So hopefully we'll have a truly county-wide effort. Vocational education opportunities, the Idaho Chamber Alliance has put that at the top of their list for lobbying the legislature this year. Moscow-Pullman Regional Airport infrastructure improvements we've been working on for about 2 years. The mayor can speak to that better than I can, but obviously this council has chosen to support that over 5 years within the amount of $250,000 per year, which is $500,000 per year, for a total of $2.5 million, mirroring that of the city of Pullman. So that's underway as well. U.S. Highway 95 from Thorn Creek Road into Moscow. Council's taken a very active support stance to get that 4-lane in, connecting us to the city of Lewiston.
Good, it's done.
And the economic development partnerships that I just described. Next strategic initiative, facilities and infrastructure. Having a unified voice for improving the region's transportation, joining the Latah County Commission, University of Idaho, our business community, the North Latah Highway District, to try and improve our transportation infrastructure, as well as the interstate connections like the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport effort as well. Community investment in communication infrastructure. Our fiber network continues to be very useful and expand where we can. The URA has been very good in its projects to installing and facilitating fiber connections. City entryways, I've already reported on that. Recycling center expansion and improvements been discussed for many years. It was probably at least a dozen, if not 15 years ago, that we purchased a piece of property south of the current recycling center site with the idea to expand it or improve it. Things have changed, and those plans are underway again. Operational and risk assessment of Fire Station number 2. It does have some things that need to be fixed out there, so we're looking at that. Siding construction of a new police facility to replace the outdated and poorly located facility that we have now. Stormwater maintenance procedures, street and fleet operational needs, emergency backup power supply for well systems, alternative water supply inventory of mains and manholes for replacement, and temperature reduction alternative pilot studies to meet our NPDES permit that was referenced earlier tonight, and the neighborhood greenway pilot project are all part of those strategic initiatives. Revenue and resources, the list is a little shorter because we don't have a lot of local authority on this. We'd like to have more education to the public about decreasing revenues and lack of alternatives. I know the community gets frustrated when they see a park that isn't developed, or they see a street that isn't fixed, or a street that doesn't get paved and it's now gravel. So we hope to help the community understand that we do have finite resources. We will apply them according to your direction as long as we have them. So we think educating will also give the community a voice in talking to the legislature about give us more resources. We're a pretty unique community. Allow us to have some resources. Communication with local legislators regarding local government revenue issues, just talked about that. And all of this flows from that. The city is represented on the Moscow Chamber of Commerce Legislative Committee, Governmental Affairs Committee. I serve on that committee at this time. We also have a legislative tour every year that we hope to get businessmen to go down with the Chamber of Commerce to help lobby the legislature. Strategic initiatives for equipment. We have fire trucks that we have a couple of them that are over 20 years old. We have 3 more of them that are due to be 20 years old within the next 3 to 5 years. The idea was to get those replaced every 20 years if possible. They were originally financed with a bond in 1990 or 91, I can't remember which. The cost of fire apparatus has gone up about 150% since then. That original bond was $1 million. $1 million now will buy you 2 pumper trucks. Engines, sorry. I thought I was in the South for a moment. At any rate, so we've got to determine how to replace those. So the long-range financial plan will address that, and we'll be coming to council in the spring to look at opportunities to do something about that. Alternative approaches to vehicle replacement. Les's department, Public Works, the Fleet Department, Tyler Palmer's initiatives out there, have been looking at the fleet operations, following vehicles throughout their maintenance life. Are they do we replace vehicles merely because they're old in years? Are they getting on in years? If you have a vehicle that you're not using very often, it may be that that vehicle is fine. It can continue in service. You may have a vehicle that's relatively new that the maintenance shows that you're spending way too much money on it. We should be nimble and be able to get those replaced. We look at funding options, leasing versus purchasing, so on and so forth. So you talk about the fleet replacement schedule, fleet replacement funding. Those are two things which we'll also be looking for future guidance. Programming and planning, performance management in our operations and the budget. I know the council, as we approach them every year, we come in here with reports. We haven't really had a comprehensive reporting tool. We go from budget to budget, we go from project to project, and that's great. It keeps things moving, but I don't believe we've done a great job as staff of bringing to you a comprehensive overview so you can map where we're going and how we're getting there. One of the things that we've talked about is performance management within budgeting. We really want to have something where we have priority-based budgeting. It's kind of a buzzword, but it's essentially putting your resources where the policymakers have the priorities placed. So that's what we hope to move to. We do that in essence now, although it's a very informal process. And the concern from the council and from staff is that maybe we're not considering everything. This strategic planning process will allow us to look at it more comprehensively and be able to get the bigger picture. When you choose to fund this here, you need to realize that, okay, we're taking resources away from there. So how are we going to rectify that? Economic impact of Moscow's farmers market. We've engaged Steve Peterson, economist at the University of Idaho. He will have that report ready at the end of January, so we'll be back in here presenting that to you as well. Program prioritization in some different departments, arts, community development, education outreach, program prioritization. What projects are undertaking in the arts department? It's a great idea to do as much as you can, but within the resources that you have. The zoning code content format organization and diagram and the continuing effort in Bill's department to try and make the codes more readable, more friendly, if you will. Not that they are not regulations, they are regulations, but if they can be administered, if they're understandable, and we check with the public and the people who use them that they in fact are usable, we're hoping to head in that direction as well. Single stream curbside recycling. Just tonight we took what we hope to be the final administrative step to implement that toward a implementation of the actual recycling in January. Certification Firefighter 1 and 2 program. Some of you attended the graduation on Saturday of the second academy class to be graduated out of that program. So kudos to our volunteer fire department, Scott Williams, our training officer, and Chief Nickerson for that effort. Police department bicycle and foot patrols identified as ways to alternatively provide law enforcement in promotion, I guess, of the community policing concept. Having an officer on a bicycle or walking by, the old officer-friendly concept, is more community-oriented than seeing a police officer go by in a cruiser. Customer service. We are engaged in a community engagement plan. We're looking at a new website that was funded in the FY16 budget. Our social media is moving forward by leaps and bounds. Hopefully what will happen is we will put all these things together to get the good word out. Our customer satisfaction surveys with contractors, developers, and other customers is just another facet of our community survey, checking to see with the customers as to the services we're providing and are they satisfied with those. Development review time targets, that's already been implemented in community development and public works, and it's being received with some good reception by contractors and developers. Public records request policies are things that we continue to work at. I know Lori's looking forward to delving into public records requests. Rod's given us a lot of information. as that area of law keeps evolving, we will continue to be challenged. But the bottom line is we need to meet the public records expectation of the community, and we will continue to do so. So with that, I've been talking nonstop for about 20 minutes. I'll stand for any questions that you have and try to answer any concerns.
Well, Gary, you zoomed through it as rapidly as possible, and this is something that's been in the works for a number of years, so that's a pretty impressive presentation you did for it. And of course, you know I'm a big fan for strategic planning and the priority-based budgeting. You know, one of the things every community runs into, and we talk about this when I'm down at AIC board meetings, you know, is doing the most you can with the amount of bucks you have. And it doesn't matter whether it's Moscow or Lewiston, Post Falls, or wherever. And everybody, you know, it's a different scale for bigger cities, but it's still the same issue for all of us. And so it's one of those things. So this really works well for us, especially the major challenge areas where we can get in and get some things accomplished and move on to the next thing and plug away with what we've got. So other questions for Gary, you guys? Dan?
Well, I'd make a motion that we adopt the strategic plan as presented.
Second.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that goes without saying.
Okay, we got a motion by Dan, a second by Wayne to adopt the City of Moscow strategic plan.
I second that.
Well, I had Wayne down.
Wayne already did.
Wayne beat you to the punch.
Well, you weren't
I'm
listening.
looking over here. Sorry.
It's okay, you third. John, I'll start with you.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And aye.
Okay, we'll move on. Thank you very much, Gary, for that
Thank you.
presentation.
And if I could just take a moment, Mayor, I'd like to thank the council for taking this step. It's one that's been important to me for the last 15 years, and I'm glad that we have it now. It's adopted. We can now use this to move forward, and I also want to thank the staff for the long hours that they put in putting this together. There were drafts and redrafts and redrafts and redrafts. And to throw the operational overviews in the middle of that, everybody kept their good humor, although they were a little frazzled at times. But to get this done within a year, I think, is really quite a feather in the cap of the council and staff.
Gary, you know, as you know, this started last year, and it has been a great process. And the thing of it is any kind of a new thing we do, as this will get better and better and more refined as we go along. That's the whole idea about having it, so it makes it easier and not more cumbersome. And so good job for you, too, and the entire staff. Dan?
You know, and I look forward, and we talked about it before, I look forward to how this affects how our budgeting process, and hopefully it helps that go along a lot better as well, and makes, you know, keep it tighter and brighter.
Can I have one more comment?
Yes.
Question Wayne asked me prior to this meeting, and that is, if you look in this huge document, you see a lot of timelines in there. And pressing staff for those timelines, I think it's fairly predictable that all those timelines are not going to be met as quickly as perhaps we optimistically put them in. However, what it does is it gives us the ability and the duty to come back to council, look at those and say, okay, what have we done on this to move this initiative forward, especially the ones that the council has prioritized. So that in and of itself is an extremely important facet of the strategic plan. So we look forward to looking at that every year. Thank you.
Let us know which book you want back to make the inserts in, Gary.
Will do.
Thank you, Gary. Good job. Well, that was the last item we had, our last action item, and so we'll start in reports now. Dan, I'll start with you.
Well, we haven't had an admin committee meeting in between. Wayne's been taking care of all the good stuff on the committee side. On November 19th, I did meet, you know, wearing another hat, but we met with the local, I guess you'd call it North Idaho Cooperative meeting with the, you know, street and road departments out there at the HERC, and Tyler demonstrated a lot of stuff about the new pavement markings that they use in town. Not only paint, but some tape markings plus some thermoplastic markings, and it was pretty interesting to hear how some of the other communities are using those as well, and how Lewiston said that it doesn't work to try and chip seal over top of them. That was kind of interesting there. I'm just going to brag a little bit here. November 21st, Keep the Beat Moscow had their community CPR class, and they got 50 people through that, so there's 50 more people that can save everybody's life out there. They're probably going to do another one in February after the holidays, so I'm looking forward to seeing more people doing that. And then the only other thing, our Tree Commission, they canceled their meeting, and then Parks and Rec Commission met, and they are going over their priorities and goals for the next year, and they're continuing on with the current. Nancy Tribble is again going to be the chair there, so looking forward to having some more fun with those guys.
Very good. Art?
Yeah, the Fair and Affordable Housing Commission met about a month ago now, and wrapped up work on the impediments to fair housing document that we need to adopt as a city council eventually, becoming our way after public comment period is closed. We need the document so we can continue to be eligible for community block grant funding. So they've finished their work on that. It's coming forward. Sustainable Environment Commission meets next week. And a week or so ago, the URA met and discussed some activities they're involved with. One is the progress with the environmental cleanup and Legacy Crossing at the 6th and Jackson Street lot. And that's moving along nicely. Should be wrapped up and free of impediments for transfer of that property to the Sangria people sometime in January or February, in time for them to commence construction come summertime. And that also includes the rerouting of the lane, the south lane of east-facing 6th Street in order to cure that poor intersection. So that'll be involved, as well as the undergrounding of substantial amounts of overhead utilities from a vista. And further, the URA voted to enter into discussions leading to the cleanup of the Sharp oil site, the old Domino's place down south of the South Couplet, to enable redevelopment of the rest of the site that lies back and behind there alongside Paradise Creek. So the URA looks to be helping out with the environmental cleanup there in order to make better use of that site, return it to productive use. So that's what I've got.
Okay. Walter?
Thank you, Mayor. On November the 19th, I attended the monthly meeting of PBAC, Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee, and the item to come out of that was that we learned that Idaho Department of Water Resources has provided a $100,000 grant to PBAC to assist in paying the consultant who's going to be working with us over the next couple of years on a water supply alternative project. So that was good news there. On December 4, last Friday, I, along with the mayor, who will speak about it, I'm sure, from a board perspective, attended the Association of Idaho Cities Legislative Committee meeting. 100-plus city council, mayor, and staffers attended an update on 23 or more proposed pieces of legislation that will be coming forward this next session that are very pertinent to cities. And we got an update on each of those, give us some idea of what's out there, what to expect, what may or may not occur. The fact that it's an election year for the legislature, I will not place any money on any piece of legislation going forward or failing. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Okay. Wayne?
Public Works and Finance was November 23rd. We only had 3 items on the agenda. One was the Title V, Chapter 3 that Ty presented to us. We saw tonight. The other was the downtown restrooms. But a third one was Les McDonald brought the Southeast Moscow Sewer District contract renewal back to us again, and we discussed that. We had a number of concerns. Walter expressed a number of concerns with that, and we felt that it really wasn't in a finished enough position to come to the council yet. So we asked that go back to whether it's going to be another workshop or what it's going to be. But there's questions that need to be satisfied before we're going to bring it before it comes to council. And so that took care of the Public Works and Finance Committee meeting. Let's see. Come on. On the 18th of November, met with the Farmers Market Commission, and this was a lot of that meeting was spent with Dwight Curtis discussing the restroom design. and a lot of discussion about it. And the other thing, the commission is looking at a market vendor evaluation sheet. Members will review this over the next month, and then they'll make some recommendations at the next meeting coming up probably this month. Has to do with are vendors falling within certain categories, and are they meeting certain guidelines that need to be met. I sat in for John that same day at the Planning and Zoning meeting, and that was a fairly simple meeting, John. They just, the majority of the meeting was taken up with discussion pertaining to the relevant criteria and standards that you had talked about, pertaining to conditional use permits and special use permits. And then on the 19th, Historical Preservation Commission meeting, and that was also, a lot of that was taken up by Dwight Curtis's discussion about the restrooms downtown. But they also talked about the commission goals for 2016 and what they haven't accomplished yet, what they want to accomplish, and what they'll carry forward with. So they're kind of doing some of their own strategic planning. I met, Art and Gary and I met last Thursday at 4 o'clock with some young folks from the University of Idaho that are finishing up their master's in public administration.
Yes, sir.
And it was quite interesting because there were just 3 of us. There was about, 10 of them. Yeah. And they really wanted to know what's it like in the real world for city staff and administration to deal with elected officials. And so Art and I and Gary were able to give them, I think, some...
And Kathleen,
too.
And Kathleen, Kathleen did show up, too. And give them some insight as to what it's like to deal with your elected officials. You might have something more to say about that, Gary, because I think they talked to you afterwards.
He said, buy plenty of Zantac.
Nope. Okay. And that's all I've got.
Hey, Jim.
I haven't been to any meetings since the last city council meeting, but everything happens this week. Pathways tomorrow, and transportation and clear water resource conservation on Thursday. So got everything this week.
Should be a busy week for you, Jim. John.
Art took care of the Alturas situation, and Wayne took care of planning and zoning for me, and I unfortunately was not feeling well enough to go to the Human Rights Committee meeting, so I missed that. That's what I've got.
Okay. All right.
Thanks for doing what you're doing.
Well, a couple of days, let's see, I wanted to mention on the 2nd of December, we had our breakfast meeting with county commissioners, University of Idaho, school district, chamber, all of us, and a bunch of us counselors, and myself was there too, so just discussed various things. On December the 3rd, I had a board meeting for EIC for District 2. And covered a number of things. And the next day we had a legislative meeting, and the things we covered on the 3rd we went over on the 4th pretty distinctively as well. So one of the good things about that board meeting is that I think we're getting a little bit more momentum going, a little bit better structure in our organization to address legislative needs with our legislators. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how well we do when we meet with them in January. And Walter brought a great point up. There's an election year, so Lord only knows what will or will not happen. We just don't know, do we? But we're going to give it our shot and keep it up. And I just wanted to mention on the 5th, we had the Firefighter 1 and Firefighter 2 certificates at Station 2, and of course we had a bunch of our counselors were there as well, Art and Walter and Wayne and Big Dan and myself, and that was a pretty neat thing. We had 20 of those kids get those certificates and a lot of enthusiasm, and that was a pretty neat thing. And then, of course, that evening they had the Fireman's Ball at the Best Western, so that was a very nice event with our volunteer fire department that's been around since 1896, and that's a big deal for our community. We can all be very, very proud of that. And I've got a airport board meeting this Wednesday night. I'll report that on the next meeting. With that, Gary, how about you?
Nothing to report, sir.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. It's 9:07, folks.
Consider yourself entertained.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are closed now, there, folks. Thank you very much. Lori.